And now we have a panel about fashion, the growth of the fashion industry, and where technology is heading next. Welcome to our speakers and to our moderator, Katarina. Katarina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We are now entering an area that is quite mixed, new, and a lot of things that is, if not already happening, it's going to happen. And the people we are here represent totally different angles or communities within this sector. So I think it would be best for you to introduce yourself. So please, Fredrik, let's start with you.
Yes, hello, and thank you, Katarina. So my name is Fredrik Timour, and I'm working with fashion tech. I've been working with fashion tech, or what's called fashion tech. I usually do not use that word myself for a very long time. I started out actually as fine art. My background is in fine arts, so I worked as an artist, and then I started ad agencies, so I've been working with advertising. Then started a company called Neue that created microelectronics and a software platform for the fashion industry. Moved on to Swedish Fashion Council, and nowadays I'm running something called Fashion Innovation Center, where we're looking into new business models and the connection between other industries in the fashion industry. And I'm also looking into education for fashion as well, working with major universities. Thank you.
Yeah, Chhail.
Thank you, Fredrik, and thank you, Katarina. I'm extremely stoked to be here. My name is Chhail Khalsa, and I'm the founder and the creative principal of a company called Anuvad. It means translating in Hindi. We work with traditional craft communities, and we combine e-textile technology with it to create products that are extremely organic and fun to use. I actually started off as a textile designer a few years ago, went on to do some very conventional textile jobs like designing home furnishing fabrics for a couple of companies, which eventually bored me out to death. And I decided to, just drum up some of my savings, go onto the field, work with craftspeople, and combine technology with it. Back then, this was not supposed to turn into anything incredible, but over time, I realized its potential, and I have decided to now take it on full time, and Anuvad is a result of that. I basically am interested, apart from my work, in dealing with how and why e-textiles are not a part of our usual lives, even though they have been around now for over 3 decades, and why we forget the user that basically uses our products at the end of the day, and how can we bring the voice of the user back into the design process. That's what I work with at the moment. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Riccardo.
Riccardo Aimerito. I'm based in Milan. I started my career from the business viewpoint in M&A, developing businesses globally, and in doing industrial venture capital, mainly on the tech side, so IT, TLC, and that side. Then in 1998, with some friends, we registered a brand, a fashion brand, and we started a journey which led us in 7 years in organic growth. The brand was called Frankie Morello. So to have a global brand without investors, we managed to achieve a 30 million euro turnover per year. So as we said, in organic growth. And so out of that experience in the fashion, I combined the two things, the two sides of the tech and the fashion, and I kept going with other projects.
Thank you. Lisa?
I think the question is like what I didn't do. I grew up in a region in the middle of Germany, which used to be huge in textiles, and then it disappeared. And I'm a part of the lost generation who had to leave and go and find something else. And I ended up in a tech startup community, worked in Australia, Silicon Valley, UK, full on techie. And in some sort of weird way, I'm like back into the family business. Because I was always fascinated about the back end. It's like you know, and I'm now in Brussels with Eurotex, which is the biggest association interest representative group for the textile and clothing industry. We have 160,000 companies. We are representing 1.5 million employees in Europe. And, you know, this is policy work, and it's called backend, but the advantage is also like having worked and, you know, established and founded companies on the industry. It's like, I know how a knitting machine smells like, but I also know how to program code, which is, you know, quite interesting in Brussels. Just at least I can tell funny cocktail stories. But yeah, so like I'm the backend girl, always was, and now again will be.
Thank you. Thierry.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. So I'm Thierry. I'm based in rainy Berlin today, and so I started in corporate design in London, and then moved very quickly into film finance for quite many years. So I'm coming more from the content side, I would say. I've been doing film finance in London, in the US, and then back to, and then in Germany, in Berlin. And then for the last, well, a bit more than 10 years now, I've extended my competencies in financing the creative sector by adding gaming, music tech, and fashion tech as well recently through a European project called Define. And yeah, I'm working on two things. One is how to help investors to invest more into this sector, because I'm heading Media Deals with, which is a pan-European investment network focusing just on the creative sector. And on the other side, to help startups to really understand what are the best financing sources for them. Should it be investment, but not only investment, also for banking and other types of financing. I've been doing also a piece of policy like Lisa, working especially for the last 10 years on the facility, the guarantee facility from the European Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Thierry. Lars.
Fascinating stories. I'm really honored to be part of all this. I'm Lars. I'm sitting in the south of Sweden, close to Copenhagen, actually, in Lund, a small city with a huge university, we used to say. So anyway, I think my journey started already when I was like 6-7 years old. Went to my grandma's work. She was the seamstress in an old factory. This is now gone for a long time. But I was captivated, you know, all this energy and all the activity on the factory floor that actually got me. And I'm still there, you know. I worked my way through the whole fashion value chain from idea to production. And now I'm involved and co-founder of an accelerator for creative industries in Lund. And also as an investor in the fashion and tech area as well. So I think that's the story. And I think it's a long story. I've spent most of part of my life in the fashion or the textile industry, to be honest. And it's really, really fun to be.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And I'm who will try to moderate this amazing crew here with all these stories. My name is Katarina, and I work for an innovation platform based in Lund, which basically tries to do all these moderating things and amazing people trying to do new stuff. And of course, talking about fashion tech, it's like, okay, what is this? It is obviously a melting point between coming from sort of the old industry, old or new, or actually existing industry, moving into gaming and technology and new materials, new kind of policies make happen, and the need of new structures for financing. All of this is here. But sort of, I know that you had a certain point, Riccardo, about what. So let's start with say what's fashion. What is, you talk about the three parts of this area, and then Fredrik, you are trying to move in the tech side. So I send you in first, Riccardo. You are unmuted.
Okay, sorry. Well, in this moment in time is very disruptive for many reasons. Disruptive time which can bring also new opportunities. I mean, if one look at the fashion industry from sort of new normal, there may be three main axes which can be identified to bring some changes either in the value chain or the value proposition or the business model. These three main areas, I would personally identify them as materials, which goes with the tech wear and wear tech and the new materials. Production, which goes with the way we produce, we manufactured, and where we manufactured. This means also local manufacturers in different places, be regional, to root yourself. And this brings in also the concept of community, which we will see later. And then the seasonality. You know, the fashion industry, the season systems is very much is pushing all the industry towards deadlines, toward pushing through products on the market, and also there is a lot of waste in that, and there are some issues in terms of circular economy and these kind of things. So creative industries, in my personal view, can really bridge this all these three elements towards more a community approach. This will bring in also some cultural and heritage problem, and the heritage also aspects which can be valorized. So these are the three main areas I think there may be some significant changes there already.
Fredrik, you have some thought about sort of these changes already, sort of, but what is most worth, sort of fashion, brand, content, connection, community, user?
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, one of the problems with the fashion industry is kind of the business model itself. Because I mean, one big challenge that everybody knows is sustainability, of course, and we need to lower volume production. We all know that's the only way to really reach the sustainability that we're hunting. And to do that, we need to switch the business model. But there are quite a lot of opportunities within switching the business model itself. So, I mean, I would say in this transformation of sustainability, there is a lot of business opportunities. And one of the things is, of course, when you move into a new business model, you have to look at other industries. I mean, for example, right now, the fashion industry talks about consumers. They need to start talking about users so they can communicate with users. And if you communicate with users, you need to have content on top of that. That's the reason why Apple produced their own TV series, of course. I mean, they need content on top of whatever products they're selling. I don't think Apple really just wants to create TV series because it's fun. Maybe they think it's fun, but I don't think it's a main driver to why they did it. So, and I mean, it's very similar to the fashion industry. You have goods. I mean, in this case, it's physical goods that you need to sell, and you need to put content on top of it, and you need to put it into a kind of a world. And that's also where I think sometimes TV series like Peaky Blinders, I mean, a TV show on Netflix, could be a stronger brand than the brand. If I have a Peaky Blinders suit, for example, let's say that was a subscription service through Netflix, that might be cooler than having a Prada suit when I go to the bar. So, because the brand value have gone down if you look over the years, and the content value is much more important nowadays. So that's one of the areas where I think really the fashion industry needs to. Yeah, Thierry have something to say.
No, thanks. I think that's very interesting. I just wanted to pick up that on the community idea, because obviously that's really where we're going to now in the different content sector, and let's say the gaming sector is leading the way about that, because for many years they have started already working on this kind of community, and for example on the film sector. And the TV series sector that you're saying during the pandemic, obviously, people were really lacking this kind of community on the film side. People were just going to the cinema, but there was no community. Who are these people going to the cinema? So I think this idea of creating community and developing community and how do you grow community, etc. I think it's really the key today to the content sector, and link that to the investment part. I think that's what obviously investors want to see as well, because that brings basically potential customers and scalability. So I think the idea of how to build communities in the different type of creative sectors is going to be very, very important now.
But don't you? I just have to question back to you, because I think this is interesting as well.
Yeah.
This community. Don't you think that the content itself is the driver for the communities? Like Harry Potter have a huge community around it, and it's the content itself that actually drives the forming of the community.
Yes, I mean, if you follow what gaming is doing, I mean, it's really working about this kind of first prototype, trying to develop a brand, an IP, a specific IP. The difference, I would say, is that today it's much more iterative, meaning you are bringing something, you see how people react, you start creating the community, and then you start adding some levels for games, or some episodes, or some seasons, or some seasons in fashion, for example. But that's really the big difference with, again, about like the film, where you have something complete from the beginning. You have a scenario, and basically it's there. Of course, Hollywood is doing that with sequels of films, but it's quite limited in terms of, like Harry Potter, you said. That's of course another very good example. But if we look at let's say the independent companies, creative companies in Europe, I think this kind of interaction and iterative work to develop projects is working with the community.
But isn't it
Just
also
as
that...
a little, just as a little voice of the back end, the definition of community also implies is that you have a workflow, you have a structure, you have a culture, and it starts with transparency and collaboration. And in that context, we're talking about transformal skills, the ability in the training to actually, be able to form collaborations, how it is to work in a team. And quite frankly, in the fashion industry, it's like, that's the opposite what you've been taught. You're the only soldier out there, and you have to live and survive on your own. That time is over. That culture is over, because you can't possibly do anything on your own, because you can't be fast enough on your own. So that's why all of the collaborations come in, and and that's why we just saw Ralph Lauren is now fitting out the e-gamer sports teams, right? So it's a old concept, but in a new context. The other thing also is that, again, sorry, the voice from Brussels is we have an issue if that the fashion industry on its own is not organized. Plus the textile industry is highly fragmentized. So if you want to get really influential, in Europe, we don't even have a functional European Fashion Council. That is unheard of. Look at the steel industry, look in the automotive industries. They've been organized. They are in Brussels, and I said okay, this is how we want it. Give us the money, and this is how we dictate you, in a collaborative way, of course, where we want to go. The voice of fashion is not even heard. And it starts with, again, collaborating communities, and to give a space for the small communities as well as for the big ones. It doesn't sound sexy, but it's necessary, because, policies will be made with or without you. And if you don't get involved, don't complain.
Sorry, because before I send you in, Lars, I just need to pass this on to Chhail, because you're trying to, you're sort of down on the floor trying to work with forming a community and making them connect. Sort of the issue of being the designer or the handcrafter or the single entrepreneur, and sort of moving from being here to here. And now we heard it's a bit of activism that is needed, and it's also a bit of learning how to work together. So you're struggling with this, and you like it.
I love it, every day of it. Yeah, I'm working definitely at the very grassroots level. That's how I started. Like I said in my introduction, I literally saved some money and I went to the field with a couple of conductive threads and LEDs and, just asked the weavers to work with me. And 6 years later, they were. Yes, it takes a lot of working together. It takes a lot of empathy. It takes a lot of patience, even, for things to develop. We don't necessarily, it's like I am connecting the world that is expecting an outcome, that is expecting a monetary value to what we're creating. And at the same time, I'm working with people who want to take chai breaks and, coffee breaks when they want. So, and I'm working with the tech experts where they're talking in terms of ohms and voltages, and we have weavers that are talking in terms of colors and patterns and how certain motifs don't work with their traditional vocabulary. So it's, everybody, it's like speaking a different language, and I'm here to sort of translate it all. And that's how Anuvad even started. It means translation, because I feel like I'm at the precipice of, dealing with different communities, quote unquote, that come from a very different understanding of what the world is like, sort of taking back to what Fredrik was highlighting in our conversation earlier, that, when you deal with scientists, they're talking in millimeters, and you deal with architects and they're suddenly dealing with meters. And even though you're talking about shape-shifting materials, everybody has a different idea of what you're doing. When I say circuit, the tech guy is thinking PCBs, and at the same time, the craftsman goes like, what? It's, so this is sort of, and this is why I also talk about, the importance of collaboration, the importance of empathy, the importance of trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, just to see the world a little differently from their point of view. And this is what I personally see as community, because the perception that I have about working with craftspeople is that they don't understand, gaming communities or startup communities or design communities or production. They understand emotion, they understand love, they understand caring, they understand all of these rudimentary things that we were taught as kids, but somehow along the way we forgot. And this is also about how you dial back to what eventually makes us a human being.
Yeah. And Lars, I send you in there because you trying to you run sort of incubator accelerator, sort of trying to make this happen.
Yeah.
So that's you, Fredrik. So some sort of, okay. I just see for everyone. Here are the group of translators between these different areas. So you see.
But I want to follow up on Lisa's logic about fragmentation, because I think that's why we talked earlier today about this has been around for 3 decades. I mean, the e-textiles, the sensors and all that stuff. And in other industry verticals like the automotive industry or whatever, they actually transform much quicker. It's another pace, they are organized. And I think that's the main problem for the fashion industry, that we are kind of fragmented, and we need to pull this thing together again. And because there are resources from Brussels, aren't they, Lisa, as well? Now it's a good initiative like the new Bauhaus initiative, and there's a lot of things happening in this area. But still, I think we can check out other verticals and see how they perform to make a fast pace in industry revolution or the industry 4.0. It's possible already to make it in the fashion industry. It's a lot of things happening in the additive area, of course, 3D printing, 4D printing, and even 5D printing. And we're involved in the Fab City launch in Lund, actually, in the later after the summer. And I think fashion has a lot to learn from the gaming industry that you represent, Thierry. Just a short story, because we invested in a small company working with Avatar in the gaming industry. I don't know anything about the gaming industry, but when I heard them talking about how building a community on Twitch, it kind of come to me that why this is a really good thing to build a user community. They really work for it. They have good content. They have even 3-4 hours of sessions, like Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. Never heard of it before, but I totally understand how much work they put into it to actually achieve success. So we have a lot of to learn from other branches like music and gaming, of course.
Yeah, Katarina, if I may, just two points based on what's been discussed. I mean, first, what is the creative industry? I mean, as a sector, we talked about automotive, we talked about, other sectors. I mean, creative industry is so many things, so many different things. And we know we are all very working on silo until now. It's very fragmented, etc. So, I think there is a question of definition and how we work together. And I fully agree with Lisa, we need to stop this idea of working alone, and we need to try to collaborate. But again, it's not easy because people are as you said, they have been taught to do everything on their own. At schools, they've been saying, for example, in film or, in other things, they say, okay, you can do your film, you're going to be the biggest director for film, you don't need anybody, you can do it on your own. So I think we need to really start about collaborating on that, and to get really an impact in Brussels and to talk to any type of politicians. I think it's very important that we work together so they see the impact. And then in terms of community, back to that, I think we should really be clear about two types of community. I think we have the community of the people, the craft people, I mean, the people working and developing the project where they need to collaborate and work together. So it's a community in itself. But of course, what we're talking about as well is really the community of users, customers, people who are really potentially buying the service. Because again, if we talk about sustainability, if you look at the definition of sustainability, it's not just about green, etc. It's really about sustain. I mean, really to be able to be to work to be profitable or to develop their company on a long-term basis. So it's very important as well to really look into that and develop this kind of community of customers. So it's two different things, definitely.
Fredrik, you have actually been doing this. You have been actually connecting the two. So because we talked about now a bit of the problems or things that are not working. But so okay, what is working? What sort of, you have been doing a lot of things. So give us some thought of how to do stuff.
How to do stuff, yeah. No, but I mean, one of the main problems is what everybody's talking about. It's collaboration. I mean, we're talking about an industry that is really not used to collaborating. So there is no internal tools to start with. I mean, you don't have any departments for it. You don't have any budgets for it. You haven't worked with, I mean, if you're talking about the fashion industry specifically, they never worked with development or R&D, research and development in general. So there is no budgets. There is no, I mean, Lars talked about the car industry or automotive. They have R&D. They put a lot of money into R&D. I mean, they're developing self-driving cars and they're not selling a single self-driving car yet. So why did they do that? To be future-proof, of course. And they're developing a lot of stuff in the background. The fashion industry, I would argue, haven't put a penny into R&D since Spinning Jenny, basically. And that was a while ago. And that's one of the problems. So it's quite hard for the fashion industry to understand the concept of that they might need to build their own IP, that they need to spend money on R&D, that they need to collaborate. Even simple things like a lot of people talk about AI, or I would say machine learning. But if you're going to use it, you need to spend R&D. And to make them work together, you need those translators in between. You need those. That's one of the reasons why I started a Fashion Innovation Center, because, and going back to what a previous speaker was talking about with the millimeters and centimeters and people talking overhead, it's the same thing. You need someone that connects them, I think, and guide them, because the fashion industry is not used to collaborate and they are a little bit afraid of collaboration. So you need to put it in something neutral where they can, sit down with a partner, maybe a gaming partner, maybe someone else, and help them and guide them. I think that it's guidance that's needed at the moment, to be honest.
It all starts with a lack of an event. I mean, there's no event, there's no place where people can meet together. I mean, if a fashion company wants to meet a game company, where do they meet? There is no place for that. I mean, you go to a game fair or you go to a fashion fair, you don't go to a place where you can meet both or other type of people.
Lisa, you had some thoughts.
Oh, I just want to make the fashion industry just more scared, because here is the reality check is, look where the disruption happened in all of the other industries. I was in the startup industry for 10 years, and I saw all of the old styled industry, like, hospitality, transportation, music, they all got disrupted from people outside of the industry, because they had no legacy and they had a huge frustration. They used the new tools. And all of a sudden, they were bigger, more successful, and more influential than actually the old players. That should scare the fashion industry, because number one, it's already been happening. And number two is like, who do you think you are that like this is not going to happen to you? So like there is an entire new world, startup industry coming, and they don't have legacy, because the fashion industry is, before we even can talk about artificial intelligence, you have to feed the monster. We have to actually digitize the heritage, what we have in the industry, before we even can work on digitalization and innovation and like whatsoever kind of stuff. It's like with Chhail, for instance, like just imagine we would like digitize all of these patterns and run an AI layer over it, and actually have the AI algorithm as a collaborative tool with us, and then just set designers in there and they put emotions in there. Yeah, and by the way, that's happening, but not in the traditional industries. So like they're losing a lot of time dealing with basics, which on the other side is standard. It's absolutely standard.
Riccardo, you had these thoughts. I can see your thinking. So.
Yeah, it's basically when we talk about the fashion industry and we look at say what we call the community in the fashion industry. So I agree with what was said, that there are an internal aspect and an external aspect. Internal aspects means in organizational design, when you organize your company, your supply chain, and everything, your stakeholders, so around your brand or your venture, basically what you do is you have the opportunity to switch from a pure fashion, sheer fashion structure to a lifestyle structure. So this means also communication is involved, lifestyles means art, culture, and then you go to the infrastructure, which means tech and everything which goes with the tech. Then on the external side of the community concept in fashion, yes, we are talking about the users, consumers, potential consumers against stakeholders. This can be interesting because let's say for a startup or for an early stage company, does it mean that if we talk about community, that an early stage company has to give up the idea of being global? No. In my personal viewpoint, is just the approach is different. So it's not top down. I try to penetrate, to conquer the world with my brand from the top. Is bottom up. So which means that I try to root myself in different community, whether geographical, whether across industries, whether it's different concept of communities. And from there, I really try to build up my customer base, a strong one where I'm rooted. And this gives also the idea for creators to open up to new projects, to exchange of visions, culture, heritage. We have a project called Dare Clan, which is mirroring this approach. And that's what we think. So the takeaway from our viewpoint is that you can still be global, although small, although starting from your community, but having a sort of a federative approach. This means also a network, a community of communities. So that's, and this can be also interesting from the manufacturing side. So being able to produce in different regions and really revamping ancient competencies that in some regions all over the world were there, and now they have been lost or they are going to be lost.
Fredrik.
Yeah, I would just want to connect back to what Lisa was talking about as well. And I would say right now we're focusing on the fashion business moving into a new business model. I mean, that's the angle we're kind of talking about. I think we might have to step back because the whole industry is ready for disruption. And if we have someone outside disrupting it, which happens most of the time when you disrupt, I think that is a big possibility. Just like Lisa said, that those who disrupt might come from somewhere else. And if we're talking about these communities, there are players out there that have millions and millions, 500 million users with their credit cards, with a community. Could they move into fashion instead of fashion trying to build up a community? Yeah, that's a big possibility, especially if we're looking at an industry which at the moment, the consumers are screaming for something different. They don't know what they want, but they're screaming for something different. That's exactly what the music industry was like before Spotify. People were saying, we want something else. They didn't know they wanted Spotify. So, but if someone else moves in, that disruptive change goes quite quickly. And we are talking about businesses, Netflix, gaming industry, where, I mean, if Fortnite are building clothes. I mean, they're selling clothes for $2 billion a year, right? Because the only thing you can buy in Fortnite is skins. They are a fashion company by all means, and they have data, and they have users, and they have credit cards. So I'm just saying that this disruption might come from somewhere else. We shouldn't focus too much on the fashion industry itself.
So it might be that a really good thing to do, sort of looking at this, would be develop your ability to work with someone else and then go out and find that one. And taking in that thinking of original content doesn't have to be Fortnite. It could be something else. I think what has the global possibilities has also created a possibility for us to be very nerdy. We can actually get into connection with almost anything. You could be like all into Japanese culture and handcraft and just want these kind of clothes, or Peaky Blinders clothes, or Assassin's Creed or whatever. So it's about having what you do and perhaps connect it to someone. And Lars, you try to help people.
Yeah, exactly.
Do this.
I'm listening. This is really interesting, and I think the future of the fashion industry. We're talking about manufacturing processes and production, and all that stuff. But still, there are virtual elements in this, as Fredrik's from the gaming industry, for instance. This has only been started so far, as I know, and the people are paying a lot of money for virtual clothing, and it will still be a cross collaboration between, or a cross sector between gaming and fashion, which is kind of really happening at the moment anyway. So what will be the collaborator that actually disrupt the whole industry? But because it will happen for sure. There's a lot of money in this industry from talking about the virtual, the skins and the avatars and all that. And I think this is really interesting. Another thing when it comes to manufacturing is, of course, the additive production facilities all over the world. I'm talking about fab labs and fab cities and all that stuff. I mean, cities need to produce what they actually consume. So local production will be, it is possible. And if you connect material science to that, talking about, for instance, Max 4 lab in Lund, which is also connected to Copenhagen actually with a database, and put a new form of group talking to scientists, not only industry, but startups and entrepreneurs with ideas, to actually translate, with the help of translate to the scientists what we're actually looking for here. What kind of materials could we extrude from the 3D printer? Recyclable, decomposable, of course, but it's possible already to do a lot of things in 3D printers. It will happen really fast. That's the physical side of fashion. The other one is the virtual side of fashion, which is a huge industry in the gaming area, of course. So I think materials is really important, and the thing that is gaming related is super important as well.
Lars, just like quickly to add that is, but that would require for the brands to actually ever having been in a factory, because that's the issue. Fashion of course has turned into a business, and the focus was to scale and go global. So you use something which was developed a long time ago, and you just try to, make a lot of money out of that. So, and then you offshored, fashion offshored all of the manufacturing. With that, you lost skills, and that is now falling on our hands. So the thing is that, what like the real designers have to do is like actually hang out with the textile industry engineers, with the material scientists, and understand why something like this happened, and understand how a machine works. You don't have to become an engineer, but understand the principle. That requires also like really close relationship, where you have a micro factory inside your office, and actually you understand. And in that context, that's where you will find a lot of innovation. That's where, because it's kind of like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is not about knowing the solution. It's about even asking the right question. That's where you find. So the little tiny little things are important. And then it doesn't matter if you have a sewing machine or a 3D printer or a knitting machine or an AI engine, because we all focus on the problem and the emotion, the problem we want to solve and the emotion we want to create, and the way how we get there, because all of the solutions, that becomes flexible, and that is going to be innovation. So the big mistake is that the industry completely split itself up and lost track of reality and lost the skills of connecting. And that's, to be honest, I'm not sure how it will recover, because the speed is incredible. But as my grandmother said, ashes are a good fertilizer. So it's definitely going to be a show in the next years.
Yeah, I'm gonna just throw in, because we are sort of, I think we could talk, we will probably go on talking among ourselves, but you are now touching upon this, which is sort of, we have an industry that has become a mass consumption thing, sort of fashion. We have a new industry moving in and disrupting everything, creating other types of communities, users in a new thinking. And we have the sustainability question here, because this industry, no matter which one we talk about, creates loads of jobs. It's really important. And it needs skills, it needs education, and it needs some new things. So I think sort of, what kind of questions, you heard each other, what would you like to highlight? We have people perhaps out here who can be disruptive and change things. What could they do? What is the game changer that you would send out to an entrepreneur or a fashion company listening, or a material scientist listening in? So where should they start? Sustainable jobs, change. What are your best advices?
I don't know. For me, I think, and especially after the pandemic, I think the customer experience is completely different today. Because I don't know what's on for you, but for me, I think it's very difficult to go back to shops and to have this old type of experience. I think today we're missing really this something new to experiment. We're talking about this experience industry for many years, and I think on retail we haven't got really that in Europe, and I think it's something, and I think that will come more from the kind. Look at Tesla, how you sell cars. Normally in the past you used to go to a garage basically to buy a car. Today you can go to a small Tesla shop, or you can buy online, and then you get your car delivered. Okay, and I think today I think this retail part has to be changed. About that, I think that should be really disrupted, because I don't know, after the time now, been 1 year without going to shops, I think I guess people will have different expectations now.
Yeah, I agree with what Thierry is saying, to the extent that actually, so the whole experience is changing, has changed. If I were an entrepreneur, either an early stage entrepreneur, but also, a big company setting up a new business unit, I would focus on mastering the cost to make the product going to the market, because this gives you the time to be safe and not to rush. And then I think the creative part, and when I say creative part, is a mix of different creations. So from gaming industry, from music, from movie, from fashion, from culture, from art. This part is the one that at the end of the day will make the difference in your value proposition. And so and gives you, if you master the costs, then this gives you the freedom as a designer, as a creator, as an entrepreneur, the freedom to achieve what you really want to achieve in terms of concept.
But Chhail, you are actually becoming the translation part for a lot of people that can get helped with sort of creating their jobs, their skills and everything, keeping it sort of rooted and down. So you are a startup in a way. So you are creating your own vehicle for change, basically. So this is another part. It's not only about being the fashion designer or the gamer, but you are creating the middle part missing, you as entrepreneur.
I think also something that I wanted to point out when we were discussing disruption is that, you know, theoretically speaking, you can only disrupt something that is defined. You know, something that's defined, that is definite. You can open it up and you can suddenly say, oh, but you know, there are 15 other things we didn't think about. But what I think missed out with design and creativity is that we are still struggling to define it. You know, it was not very long ago that we thought design was all about creating pretty products, and now we're talking about design as a way of living, as a way of thinking. We're talking about design in schooling. We're thinking about design as practically a way of existing. And this is where I think we're sort of still trying to play catch up with the other industries, because I think, you know, bringing back to what the discussion was about, how the automotive industry and the hospitality and steel have progressed, is because very early on they defined themselves. And I think we've already now moved way past of that stage where we can still go back and say, okay, let's define what design is all about. So we're now already in this open gray area where everything is creativity and everything is design. And that is where I also find myself, you know, I am a designer, but I'm also a researcher, but I have to work as a techie when I have to work as a weaver, I have to work as a researcher, I have to work as an entrepreneur. So you yourself as an entrepreneur per se, you're no longer putting yourself, you know, quote unquote, in boxes. You're doing practically everything. And now, especially in the creative industries, so more so, because you're trying to understand everybody you're working with, and you're still trying to make sense of where you want to go. So I think if there's one takeaway for my for what I could probably, you know, give out at the end of this discussion, is that we need to learn how to understand the other languages before we try to make our own. We need to start to see the other points of view, because we're no longer isolated. We're no longer the designer who makes pretty sketches and creates, you know, great brown products. We are people who are activists. We're people who are driving the change, and you cannot drive change without understanding what the change is all about, what the world is all about. So it's also about opening your eyes up to understanding where you are situated. For example, what Lisa said, you know, sit with the weaver and understand what weaving is all about. Go sit with the coder and try to understand Java. And that's when ideas and possibilities open up. So as a creative entrepreneur, we're no longer playing one role. We have to shuffle and juggle between multiple roles. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And that would probably be my takeaway from my experience so far.
This sounds like the perfect slipping over the thinking to you, Fredrik. So doing this.
Doing this. Well, I will go back and just, like you said, what tip do you have for a startup, or what can you give the startup? And I would say one thing that at the moment, that I think is quite exciting is we're looking at an industry that, it's one of the world's biggest industries, and they haven't digitized anything during the whole value chain. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, and that's really an opportunity, especially for startups at the moment. And then going back to what you said about defined, I totally agree with that. You need to define it. But when we talk about disruption in the fashion industry, I think what's really is defined, I would say, is the business model itself. Because I mean, it's basically been the same since the Industrial Revolution. Mass production, we should produce more clothes the year after that we did the year before. I mean, continue to produce more clothes and 4 seasons. Yes, some fast fashion have a lot more than 4 seasons, but I mean, basically 4 season and mass production has been the same since the 1700s. That can really be disrupted because it's very defined. And I think that's where disruption will happen. And that's also where I think a lot of startups have an opportunity when you look at, because that's where digitalization and especially the user communities, what we're talking about, can be used as well.
Yeah. I don't know, just a comment on that. I fully agree with you, Fredrik, but I really think that if there is a disruption coming from outside, I'm not sure they will touch these points. That's why I talked about retailers. I mean, if you look at what Amazon did for books, you know, they didn't change basically how to make books. They changed the distribution of books, and it's, I think it's what the technology is doing. Back to the community thing, etc., is really accelerating and pushing this kind of distribution, and then move, you know, backwards into the now. Amazon is doing Audible and is developing so audiobooks, etc. So, and Netflix is starting by distribution, and now they are producing movies. You see what I mean? But they start with the distribution because this is where I think there is where the weak link, and it's easier to get into.
Yeah, but I agree. That's why I said business model. I think that's where the disruption will happen. It's in the business model itself. I mean, if you look at the young people today, ownership versus accessibility. If you can have 2,000 garments in your pocket, you know, and you can only have 5 at home, and you pay X amount per month instead, what will, I mean, you can have everything that we do. You can have our whole wardrobe, you know, for a subscription fee, for example. Yes. No one is offering this. That's why the comparison goes with the fashion, with the music industry. You know, there isn't anyone that offers an alternative to the current way of accessing clothes. And I think that that's where the disruption will happen, which is what you basically said as well.
Lisa and Lars, any recommendations for startups? And then we have like 5 minutes for questions, so that we need to cherry pick them.
Well, it's like my you know, mantra, of course, is like get involved. You know, it's and it's actually easier to get involved as, you know, it's like the way how I got into Brussels is like, during my time as an entrepreneur, I was on stage talking about fashion tech and, you know, how important is impact. And I had a member of the European Parliament coming to me and say, like, you should go to Brussels. And I did an internship in the Parliament, incognito. And then through that, I was able to talk with people in the Commission. And the awesome thing was that I realized is like, they actually really want to talk with us, like us, startups, entrepreneurs, disruptors. They just don't know how, because, you know, only if you scream, somebody hears you. So, but, you know, so that's a bigger picture. It's like, there are so many, there's the new European Bauhaus Initiative, there's the European Innovation Council, there's the European Research Council, there are the Horizon programs, Erasmus+. You know, don't get discouraged only because the website are not like so prettily designed, but the content is awesome and the access is fantastic. Go on your national level and look for the association in your sector. If it's like the technical textiles, the apparel association, let it be the machine manufacturers union, whatsoever. See what like the European associations like, go and knock on their door. It's their job to listen to you, but you know, they won't hear you if you don't knock on their door. So they, and the mindset on all of that is that it's a huge opportunity, because I have so many designers, you know, coming to me and said like, okay, like everything has been done. how can make I an impact and a difference? It's completely the other way around. Everything is open if you're prepared to go cross-sector. You can write the new playbook. That was absolutely impossible a couple of, decades ago, but now you have the opportunity, just like, you just have to create it yourself. Extra work. That's why you're an entrepreneur, right? You're used to that. Go for it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a good closing word, I think. Be an activist. You told me before, and everyone in the panel and the audience as well. Be an activist. I mean, the easiest way to get along is to actually take this kind of contact with the networks, like Creative Business Network, for instance, which is kind of diverse network, but still, you need to go for the first contact, and after that, you will realize the next step. It's kind of really easy to take the first steps. Then it gets more complicated, of course, but get started and be an activist.
Okay, having activists as sort of framing it all, and having all you activists here on the panel, we managed to save 5 minutes for some questions. So
yes, so I will begin with one of the questions, and it's you talked a lot about communities, about transparency, and about collaboration. And at the moment, there is big discussion in society as well. One is about cultural appropriation, and it's very relevant for fashion. And another one is more about intellectual property rights. And when big companies take advantage of smaller designers, I would just like to ask all of you, what do you think about that, about those two, the discussions around them, and how they can benefit fashion?
Fredrik, that's you. I know that. Come on.
Yeah, well, it's a super hard question, but I think one aspect of it at least, and then you have to fill in the rest of the panel. I think it's quite important with IP, and I think that designers should regard themselves. I mean, in other industries, in other creative industries, like let's say book or film industry, if you write a book, you automatically got the intellectual property for the book, and if you could start regarding whatever you create within the fashion industry the same way, I mean, it's basically an intellectual property. It's a world that you're building, and thinking about it more as content, going back to what we talked about with content, I think that will be very beneficial for the industry. And it's also something you can use in a broader, the smart thing about intellectual property when it comes to these worlds, like Harry Potter, for example, or whatever it might be, is that it can branch out into fashion, films, books, a lot of different products. As a designer, as a creative person, I think that that's just something to have in mind. What can it branch out to? What can it become, the intellectual property that I'm building as part of my designs, as part of my world?
I recommend get all of the designers, tag everything with NFTs, make it digital, publish it. There is the European platform for design registration. Register it there. It's for free. It doesn't protect you entirely, but you have an official authority with a timestamp that like you filed that design. Go and have a drink with a patent lawyer. They're not that scary, but they actually really like to talk about their work. Of course, on the other side, creativity lives from inspiration, not copying, but everything is a remix, as we know. So see it as an opportunity. I know, we all know the sting of like when you see somebody has copied you and, taking the recognition away from it. Digitalization is a protective knight for you. But on the other side, also that means it's like you're actually right. If somebody copies you, that means you are an advantage because you are quicker. So because they can copy you, but they don't know the knowledge. So just become faster.
And then we have one more question, because there is a lot now happening in the fashion and also in the tech industry. And you talked about collaborations that are necessary, like artificial intelligence and gaming. How would you imagine like a workspace where those two professionals can collaborate? Fashion creatives and tech, what kind of workspace should that be? Could be also initiative, a hub, or something like that.
I'm going to add something coming from an innovation platform. Sort of the workspace, it's sort of, well, that's pretty hard. But as soon as you create a workspace, a physical space, it becomes someone's home. So then it becomes curating and getting the right kind of persons into that area, inviting your friends. I think we need to curate both physical spaces alongside with digital spaces where you can meet up and share. And the key with this is not what is in it, it's how you change it, because what's in it 1 month might need to be something else the next month. So the key to curate this kind of platforms, places, or communities is to build in the possibility to change, to redo things, to connect to something else, which is the thing that you usually miss. You build something, it becomes static. So anyway, build anything, but build in the possibility to change.
And also, I think this is a closing remark, that you need a translator in between.
Yeah.
You really need a translator. It could be a fashion innovation center that I'm building, and the reason why I built it is that we saw the lack of a translator. So I think that that's needed.
And I can see that we are running out of time, but I would like to thank all of you for this wonderful panel discussion. Thank you.